Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Fair Game Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Smith. Today's guest joins us from Iowa, where she's the fair manager for the Wright County Fair in Eagle Grove. She is Tricia Rosendahl. Welcome to the show, Tricia.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad we could get you on the show. You really, you quietly have one of my favorite fairs to do in Iowa. It's 2 years now. We did it. We're going to rotate me out. We got you. I guess you guys got some new stuff coming in this year. Eagle Grove is this cool little town. You got a great little fair. How about you tell the folks about it? What's going on with the Wright County Fair? What are your typical dates when you run? What's your attendance? Give us some background.
Yeah, so typically we are the first part of July every year. This coming year in 2024, we're going to be July 9th through the 14th. We're actually adding a day to the fair this year. We were having so many things stack up on top of each other that we decided to add one more day and kind of spread things out a little bit. So we're going to go Tuesday through Sunday, the 9th through the 14th, 2024, here in Eagle Grove. We are a free gate, free parking fair. So really, you can come to the fair and do lots of things without having to spend any money. Of course, there are also opportunities to spend money at the fair.
Of course.
When isn't there, but we're free gate and free parking. So we really do a lot of estimation for the attendance at the fair because we don't have any gate to go off of there. So
Right.
we estimate anywhere from 10 to 12,000 people every year. Just a great opportunity for people from all of our communities and surrounding counties to come and enjoy time together.
Well, and Eagle Grove and Wright County, for anybody who hasn't been into this area of Iowa, it's a very small rural agricultural community.
Yep.
I was looking it up earlier. There's just a lick under 13,000 people in the entire county. Um,
Correct.
so an event like yours can actually have a fairly big impact on the community. What kind of impact do you see that your fair has for your small community?
Yeah, I see that as something that the whole county looks forward to every year. We have a sponsorship program that has grown leaps and bounds over the years that we have had it. And there are sponsors from all parts of the county. Our fair is not located in the county seat, so we are not in the center of the county. So the people that are on the farthermost corner of it have to travel a ways to get here. But we still get lots of sponsorships from every part of the county and even people outside of our county. So it's something that we look forward to every summer. It's an opportunity to come together, to enjoy time together, to be educated on agriculture, to support our 4-H and FFA kids in all of the work that they've done for the past year, and to also just have fun together and celebrate together.
Yeah, it really is a fantastic little event. You said I didn't realize this, that you guys aren't the county seat. What is the county seat for Wright County?
Yeah, the county seat is Clarion. So
Oh, okay.
the
Up the road a
community
little.
I
It's
travel to every day for school is the county seat, where the county courthouse is. And it's about 15, 20 minutes from here.
got
And
it.
then you go beyond that a little bit farther for Belmont as another one of our larger communities in the county.
Sure. Now, I remember talking to you last year when I was out there at the fairgrounds. It blew my mind the level of sponsorship and partnership you have with your community for a little fair with 10 to 12,000 people. Because I'll tell you, from my perspective, how we as entertainers do this. We get into a fair, a date book or something like that. And when we see a little fair that, oh, it's 8,000, it's 12,000, we automatically go, they probably don't have especially when it's a free fair, they probably don't have the budget to
Mhm.
book an act like Play with Giants or a magic show or a juggling show or things like that. And yet you managed to really build up a large sponsorship and partnership with your community. How do you go about doing that? Is that just you? Does your fair board get involved? How does all that work?
Yeah, it's the entire fair board. And I even have one fair board member who's retired from the fair board now, but he still helps us with the sponsorship program because he believes so wholeheartedly in the fair and wants to make sure that we continue to succeed in that area. So we have grown that program really based on personal contact. So I talk to the people that I do business with in the county. My farmers talk to the co-ops. Other board members who, buy their furniture in Eagle Grove talk to the furniture store. If they bank at a bank, they're the ones that go and talk to the bank. So it really is, we have divided a ton of our sponsors up to all of our Fair Board members, and myself and all the Fair Board members go out and make those personal contacts every year.
And
Yes, we send them a welcome letter and don't forget us in your budgeting time. But then it's that personal contact that we make with them that really helps, and what we feel is the caveat to the success of the program. Because we're coming up on 20 years with our sponsorship program. And the first year that we started it, we raised, I think it was like $19,000, and we thought we were, living high.
right.
And over the years, it has grown itself every year. Once one person hears about it, then the next person wants to hear about it, and the next person wants to hear about it. And short of the year when we had COVID and we
Yep.
didn't have a fair, every year the sponsorship program has grown. And this
That's
past
great.
year, we raised just over $109,000
That's
in one
insane.
year.
So wild for a
It
little
is.
fair. Like that's
It,
an amazing numbers.
Yeah, yeah. And we are so proud of that. In the program itself as a whole, when you add up all of the numbers from each year, we just surpassed the $1 million mark with our sponsorship program.
I'm just dumbfounded. Like for anybody listening, I'm telling you what, this little community, the sponsors that you're dealing with, these aren't massive corporate, multi-billion dollar. These are the people that you go to church with that happen
Yes,
to be the
exactly.
manager of the bank. These are people that you work with at your school. They're parents that,
Yep.
they're an attorney in the area and they kick in $1,000 or things like that. This
Yes.
is grassroots sponsorship. I'm guessing there's not a sponsor that's like, here's a $50,000 check. It's a sponsor. It's tons of them. That's like, here's $1,500. Here's a
Yeah.
$1,000. Here's two thousand
Yes.
dollars.
Yes. Exactly. And a few years back, we added a level because we had one sponsor in the program that kept saying, "When are you going to make the next level?" He was hoping that he could be the top
Oh,
dollar
he wanted to
level
be
and
the
be the
guy,
only one
huh?
up there. So we added a $2,500 level a couple years ago.
Wow.
He jumped to that right away. But then a couple other people jumped with him. And then we had another sponsor in town say, I'd really like to sponsor the fair and I've got about this much in my budget. What can we do for that? And it was above the $2,500.
Wow.
So we added more levels. This last year we added a $5,000 level and a $10,000 level. Didn't have anybody at the $10,000
Sure.
level, but we did have a couple jump in at the five. And so, it just is, it's there, it's offered for them, but really the bulk of our sponsors are $100 sponsors, $150 sponsors, 250 and $500 sponsors. And so really it doesn't matter to us what level you are as a sponsor because every one of them is important to us because they all add up.
Absolutely.
I used to do an activity with my second graders when I taught second grade about a penny, the value of a penny. And everybody would bring in their pennies from home and we would raise hundreds of dollars just from everybody's pennies at home. So it doesn't matter how much the sponsorship is, but when we all work together, we can make really great things happen.
Yeah. And I continue to think about the numbers. You raised just, $109,000 from a community that's got 13,000 people in the entirety of the community.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about the number of sponsors that are $200 sponsors, 500,000, that are those little dollars, you're
Mhm.
probably generating sponsorship from 10 or 15% of the overall community at large, which just blows my mind because I think about like the New Mexico State Fair here in Albuquerque that gets I think they're running 400,000 people. And I think, well, what would happen if they got 10% of our community at large, which is about 600,000 people? Could you imagine the New Mexico State Fair trying to
Mhm.
process 60,000, not $60,000, 60,000 sponsorships?
Right.
And I mean, granted, at scale, it's much smaller for you
Mhm.
guys, but
Mhm.
I just that's huge scale for what you're
Right.
doing for such a small operation. That's really impressive.
Yeah.
So what can visitors expect to see at the 2024 fair this year?
I had a visitor say to me several years ago, this county fair is like a mini state fair. There's just something going on at all times and in so many different ways. The 4-H building is open to highlight all of the static exhibits that the kids have worked on for the entire year. There is free entertainment happening around the grounds in multiple locations.
Yep.
The carnival is here. There is commercial vendors. There are all of the livestock exhibitors that are here. We added a kid zone, which is where we brought you in a couple years ago to help us
Yep.
out with.
Fix
Added
that
a
building
kid
up
zone.
nice, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah. We used to have 2 commercial buildings, and it got really hard to get enough commercial vendors to fill 2 of them. And we were like, well, what can we do with this other building? We can't just leave this building sitting here. And how are we going to get people to come to the fair and stay with their
Yep.
families?
Yep.
And so we wanted to provide something where the families could come and enjoy a few things and have fun together. You helped us bring in a lot of that educational piece of that,
Yep.
but then they come and they stay for a much longer piece of time.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys do a really good job. And I know this year there's always that little bit of heartbreak as an act when you find out you're getting rotated out. And this is my year to get rotated out. But I'm actually kind of glad that you guys did, because your fair is just at its size is just too small to have the same act year after year after year. Like the state fair can afford to do that. The state fair could be
Hmm.
like, no, we're going to have you in for 5 years.
Hmm.
You guys can't, because if all of a sudden people come back a third or fourth year in a row and they're like, oh, it's Play with Giants again, you're going to start, there's going to be a little sour taste that starts to get left in your guest's mouth, where they go,
Hmm.
well, at least they had a new show over here, but that, you have to keep like 2 years, maybe three
Hmm.
tops on rotations to keep things fresh for people.
Absolutely. And we toyed with that in the very beginning because I said to the fair board, the fairgoers are growing older. So whether it's a 5-year-old that played in with playing with giants, well, 2 or 3 years from now that's a 6, 7 or 8-year-old.
Yep.
And so they may not necessarily want to be a part of that piece of the puzzle, but there's something different for them. And then we have new 2, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds coming
Yep.
into the game. So um, we played with that for a while, and how do you make sure that you are meeting the needs of all of your fairgoers so they want to continue to come back year
Yep.
after year after year? And I think that's the part that we stew with every year.
Of
Like
course.
we go down to convention and we look at all the acts and all the entertainment that's available. And are we picking the right things? That's always the guessing game every year.
Right.
Are we picking the thing that's going to draw the fairgoers to come back to the fair,
Right.
to want to be a part of that?
Well, and ideally for a building like what I was in, you have something like Play with Giants that is solid, and every few years you can bring it in. You'd want to find 2 or 3 exhibits like Play with Giants, or in that that kind of same vein. That okay, 2 years it's Play with Giants, 2 years it's the you know Bubble Factory Science Fair, da da da,
Hmm.
whatever it
Hmm.
is. 2 years
Hmm.
it's this exhibit, so that way. Because I know you and I've already talked about, and we spoke with your board in Des Moines at the convention about doing, I forget, 26 and 27 maybe. Now you already have this rotation where that 6-year-old and 7-year-old, they had so much fun with Play with Giants, and now they get to go try something else. And then, boom, they're 9 or 10, and they go, "Oh, I remember this. It's back. That's so cool." And
Hmm.
you get this renewed energy with the fair, that there's always something new. And then just when they think, okay, it's always going to be something new, and then it's like, oh, this old family favorite comes back. So,
Right.
and
Right.
you guys just can't afford to keep the same things. You're too small. You're too tight a community where things can get stale very quickly if you don't
Hmm.
keep it fresh. So as much
Hmm.
as like, oh, my heart was just a little bit wounded, like, oh no, this sucks. But I know that it's for the better of the fair. So that's always good.
Yeah, and I think my heart was a little bit wounded too because I felt like we really connected with each other, and I felt like I could trust you. And so there was a lot of pieces of the puzzle where I'm like, what, we can trust him. We know he's going to put on a good product. Let's bring him back again. And they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, but the community wants something new and different. And so there's a little bit of that game that goes on with it too, is when you start to make those connections with entertainers, and you want to make sure that you feel like if you're going to present them to your community, that you trust the person that you're putting
Yep. Yeah.
in that avenue. So it's not an easy
No,
decision.
it's not. It's, but I mean, I could see, I can't even imagine this at scale at something huge like the State Fair in Des Moines. But you guys in that little grounds you have in that little park, you've got, I mean, you can have some strolling, but essentially you've got like three footprints of space. You've got the
Hmm.
spot where like the pig races can be, you've got the spot where the magic show or the bubbles or whatever it could be, the foam
Yep.
zone like you had with Bill, and then you've got my building.
Hmm.
That's not there's not a lot to work with. And you'll, of course, you have found, no doubt, that as you have started to build relationships with different entertainers, you go, man, that foam zone was amazing. Man, that Play with Giants is like, you can only have three.
Yep.
But I think the real professionals, those of us out there that have done it long enough, when you sent me that, the best part of that email was that you sent it to me early.
Hmm.
You sent it to me with plenty of time that I knew coming into the convention. Okay, I got this weekend open. I knew the 4 or 5 other fairs that were running concurrently with your dates. Who am I going to go fill? And I got it filled. That's
Yeah.
my thing. What
Perfect.
drives me crazy and drives all of us entertainers crazy is when it's, yeah, we're gonna get to you. I think we're gonna have you back. Yep, it looks pretty good. And then we get to May or March, and they're like, oh yeah, the board made a different decision, and it's like, oh, you
Yeah.
killed us. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And that and we want to keep that relationship also so that we can bring you back, because if we kill you once, you're going to be more hesitant to come back to us.
I will never not come to Eagle Grove because you
Good.
guys have that. What's that? The restaurant, is it Family Diner, Family Table?
Family table. Yep.
That, and I've told you this before, that like they have a
Chicken
chicken
sandwich.
sandwich there. It's a bacon chicken sandwich that it's on a pretzel bun. Oh my God, you guys, if you're listening, to our 6 listeners, if you ever fancy a vacation to Eagle Grove, Iowa, like I grew up in New Mexico. Like we have all the best Mexican food like you can imagine. It's amazing. And we have incredible food. My wife comes from the South. They have incredible food. And I am tripping over this chicken sandwich in Iowa. So no doubt, here's what's gonna happen. I've got because there's no fairs, I don't think, in the 4th of July weekend in Iowa this
Okay.
year. I think Buchanan may have run last year. I don't remember because dates kind of fluctuate. But
Right.
no doubt, while I am on that hiatus in between, I guess it's between Jen's Fair and when I go over to, I believe it's Carroll County. I'm gonna come buzz into. I have to
There
have
you
my
go.
chicken sandwich. I will come buzz
Good.
in. I'm gonna call you and be like, "Hey, can I park on the fairgrounds for a couple days?" And you're gonna be like, "Yeah, totally." And we're gonna go have a chicken sandwich.
I'm up. I'm up for it.
Awesome.
Please do.
So if a family, if you get a new family that comes into Eagle Grove, Iowa, of all places, and they're like, well, hey, the county fair is going on. If they were to call
Hmm.
you up and say, hey, tell us about the fair, what should we check out? It's mom, dad, and a 9-year-old.
Yep.
What can they look forward to at the fair?
I would just really encourage them. We're, like you have stated before, we're not a big footprint, right? So we're a smaller county fair, but you need to just walk the fair. Because then you'll see in a very short amount of time all the different things that's going on. And then you can make decisions from there as to what it is you're going to want to really take in. Stick around for that free entertainment piece, or the ninja experience, or the Louis comedy circus, all of those
Yep.
different things that are happening, or the Bill Riley talent show that's happening on the free stage.
Yep.
All of those things that are happening, you can take that in. We have signage across the entire fairgrounds for everything that's happening, with flyers that you can stick in your pocket, so you know when everything is happening. But just take a minute to walk the grounds, and survey the area and figure out what it is you want to then make sure that you're taking in.
Yeah. And you guys actually kind of that blessing of size because you are so small. Folks, when she says take a minute and walk the grounds, it's not much more than a minute. I mean, you could darn near spit from one side of the fairgrounds to another. It's a tiny one. I think if you were
Yep.
to take, I agree with you wholeheartedly. If somebody they park, they walk in, if they took 10 to 15 minutes and just did a loop and looked at
Yep.
the little guide of, oh, well, here's Play with Giants, here's Louis Circus, here's whatever's going
Mhm.
on, here's the
Mhm.
times. Okay, then they can go grab something to eat, and then they can start their fair day. And you guys have, it's kind of gotten, the first year I was there, it was right up by where Bill had Kid Celebration. Tell me, what is this game you guys, the kids play in Iowa? They kick a ball in like a little octagon. What is
Oh yeah,
that?
Gaga Ball, Gaga Ball.
Yeah,
And so that was actually, and that's another really cool thing when kids see that there's something that they would like to add to the fair. That was a 4-H project of a
yeah,
kid, and then donated it to the fair. So they created it, donated it to the fair, and it has become a huge thing that the kids enjoy. So, if they're here all day, every day, they're showing their animals, they're caring for their animals, but then they have that downtime. So Gaga Ball is a game that they love to play. We've even found at certain times of the day, you might even find an entertainer in between one show to another that's jumped in there to play with the kids.
right.
Last year, I had one of my Fair Board members, a newer Fair Board member, had a gravity wagon at home, and he made that gravity wagon basketball game.
Hmm.
So, again, just other things that kids can do,
Yeah.
free things that kids and families can do to enjoy their time and stay longer at the fair.
That first year that I was out there, because Sarah and Nate were with me for that week before she had to fly home and get back to the school schedule. Nate would have been 10 or 11. We don't, I don't think there's no Gaga Ball out here in New Mexico. Like the first time I'd ever seen it in my life was when I came to see you guys. And what I found interesting, Nate sees these kids playing and he's like, "Well, what is that, Dad?" And I said, "Well, that's called Gaga Ball." And he's like, "What is that?" And I'm like, well, there's this ring that they're in and they kick a ball at each other. I don't exactly know what it is. Let's go check it out."
Uh-huh.
And they were playing around and Nate was trying to figure it out and I was trying to figure it out. And then one of the kids is like, looks at Nate and he goes, "Hey man, do you want to try?" And just invited him in. And Nate was like,
Yep.
"Yeah, what do I do?" He's like, "I'm gonna look like an idiot because I don't know what this is." And they're like, and
Mhm.
the kid literally goes, "That's okay. We all look stupid the first time." And they played it, and Nate lasted like 2.5 seconds before he got knocked out of the out of the game.
Yep.
But he
But the
had
fun
fun, and
part,
that was it was so cool. I think it's a testament to the kids there in Iowa that they were just like, "Hey man, here's this new kid. Come on, check it out."
yeah, you want to play.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I was going to say, when we were talking earlier about, you can walk the whole grounds in 10 or 15 minutes. Sure, you can walk the whole grounds in 10 or 15 minutes, unless someone talks to you, stops and talks to you and
And
tries
then
to
it's
find out
two
where you're from
hours.
because they don't recognize you.
Well, and they'll hear people. It's funny is people come into the Play with Giants and they'll talk to me and they'll say, "Oh, this is so great! So what a great idea for the kids!" And I say, "Well, thank you. How are you enjoying the fair?" And they hear me talk and they go, "Where's that accent from?" And I look at them like, "What accent?
What
I
accents?
don't have an accent." But y'all pick it up. Y'all pick up. There's something different. This guy doesn't. It may not be an accent, but he doesn't sound like he's from Wright County, Iowa.
So true.
Yeah. So in your time there as fair manager, you've no doubt seen some challenges with this fair. Can you talk about some of those challenges that you guys have faced and what you've done to overcome them?
Yeah, I would say, in my very first few years here, we had a carnival, lost a carnival. We all know the carnival business is it seems like there's a million fairs happening all at the same time in about a 9-week period or 8-week period. And so it's hard to find another carnival. We had heard of one that was more local in this kind of north central Iowa area. So we figured out what their schedule was and we kind of became creepers. We kind of just showed up at every one of the fairs that they were playing at every time
Hmm.
they moved to a new fair. A couple board members and I made a road trip and we went and saw them. And
You
we
were
wanted to make sure that
stalking
they
them.
remember. Yeah, we were stalking. But that began a great relationship with Steve and Vicky Smith.
Yep.
And then we're able to bring Smith Amusements to the grounds. And then until they retired, then we had them until they retired. And then we brought in Scott Amusements. So we were able to kind of overcome that and keep that carnival because we went for a couple of years where we tried inflatables one year. We tried just different homemade carnival game kind of things over there in that area. And it just wasn't the same.
Right.
And even though there are a ton of fairs that don't have a carnival, it just to our community, it was something that was very important to them. So
Yeah,
we
your
continue.
carnivals in Iowa. When people think Iowa, they think the Iowa State Fair. There's
Uh-huh.
always a Ferris wheel at the Iowa State Fair because it's the Iowa State
Hmm.
Fair.
Hmm.
But the majority of fairs across county fairs across Iowa, there is not a Ferris wheel in your
No,
carnival.
right.
And that was a surprise. That first year I was out in Iowa, that was a surprise to me that
Hmm.
there weren't
Yep.
Ferris wheels. And I was asking a friend of mine about that, and he said, you got to remember these are very small, mostly small family operated carnivals.
Yep.
And to move a Ferris wheel takes, depending on the size of the wheel, five, six, eight, a dozen trucks.
Yep.
And they just don't, so it's not worth
Yeah.
the investment for them to do that.
Right. And the setup and tear down of that each and every time. So yeah, we don't have one, but we have a Rocco plane, and we have lots of other different
Yep.
carnival rides that kids and
Yep.
families get to enjoy. So that was one of the challenges that we had to overcome, and we're able to do that. I would say another challenge was the rising cost of everything, which is hence why we started the sponsorship program and why
Yep.
that has continued to grow and been very prosperous for us. So that we are able to have lots of different free entertainment happening around the grounds, as well as we're starting to get larger and larger acts in the grandstand each
Sure.
night. So the sponsorship program has been a huge help for us. And then, of course, the very challenging year of COVID, when we had to make the horrible decision and contact our entertainers that we already had booked,
Hmm.
and our carnival and everything else that was happening, that we weren't going to be able to have a fair that year. We
Right.
still uh, we didn't have a fair as we know it that year. We had a modified fair where the kids still got to bring in their animals and showcase their animals. But they came in the morning, we vet checked everybody. Only certain people with wristbands got to come in. And once the show was over, everybody packed up and went home. And then the fair board spent the night disinfecting and cleaning everything to be ready for the next round,
Right.
to come in the next day. But it just felt like a ghost town every night when it was just a few of us here doing those things to prepare for the next day. So yeah, that was a major challenge, and it divided the board for a little bit of time. But then when the final decision was made that that's the way we were going to go, we decided that, together we needed to move forward. And the only way that we were going to make that happen was together. So that was a huge challenge, because we met in the show arena so we could all spread out to try to
Yep.
keep everybody safe. And it was big decisions to make,
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
and decisions we didn't like to make. But with public health and law enforcement and the county supervisors and everybody chiming in on what they felt we should be doing,
Yeah.
that was the decision that was made. So that was a huge challenge that we didn't like doing. But the very next year we're able to rebound from that and have another great fair where everybody was able to come together.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys have got a great thing going on. So let's switch gears real quick, because we're coming up on about a half hour. So let's see if we can't switch gears and get listeners a little bit. I want them to know a little bit more about you, Tricia the person, not Tricia the fair manager. While you're heavily involved with the fair, you're making your living as an educator. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm coming up on almost 30 years in education. I've done a little bit of a lot of things. I started my first year out of college not getting a full-time teaching job. And so I moved back home, much to my dismay and my parents' dismay, moved back home, and I started substituting. Substituted for a half a year and then got a full-time job mid-year, and have been in at Claring Field Dow's schools ever since. So I've helped in a kindergarten classroom. I've been a Title I reading teacher. I've taught second grade. I've taught sixth grade. I was elementary principal for 15 years. And we started a new position at the school as Dean of Students.
Mhm.
And I decided to jump to that role just as an opportunity to kind of slow down a little bit.
A little less
Um,
intense.
a little less intense, but it is really what I love to do, is building relationships with kids.
Yep.
And when kids are struggling and kids need someone in their corner, I'm the person that we go to, and I just love building those relationships with kids. So this is my first year in that role. I am elementary through middle school, so I'm through eighth grade. working with two brand new principals, not brand new to the profession, but brand new to our district. And the three of us together have teamed really well together, and it's just been a fabulous year. So again, coming up on close to 30 years of being in education at Claringlefield Dows.
When you compare what you do at the fair to what you do in education, it seems like you're really passionate about working with kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It just is, it really is showing kids that someone cares, and someone's in their corner and someone supports them. And so, that's the first part of the problem of getting to work with kids, so that they know that they have genius and they have potential in them, and that they want to strive to do really great things.
What's the best advice you've ever been given?
Many years ago, I listened to a speaker, and one of the things that really stuck with me from her presentation, and I say it all the time, is kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so it really is building that relationship with them, because they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah, totally agree. If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
I asked a similar type of question to a group of kids, because had to give a presentation at a school board meeting, about the new position and about how things were going. And one of the students that I worked with said, "I want them to know that you always listen to my side of the story." This is a student that feels like, when something goes wrong, that people don't always listen to him.
Mm,
And so he felt that I always listened to his side of the story. And usually, once he was able to get off of his chest his side of the story, then he could start to see some things that maybe he didn't do so well. But when you shut them down and you don't listen to them, then it's harder for them to process, because they feel like they're not being heard. So I want people to remember that I'm always willing to listen to both sides, because there's two sides to the story all the time.
that's really powerful. And I'll tell you, I've seen that in action. In
Mhm.
2007, Sarah and I moved from Albuquerque down to Orlando. And it's interesting. I just recorded the podcast earlier today with Michael Tipton, who's the head of the Central Florida Fair. And that Sarah taught at the elementary school that's right around the corner from that fairgrounds when we lived there. It's a tough neighborhood. It's called Pine
Mhm.
Hills. It's a predominantly Haitian, it's a very impoverished neighborhood, very low socioeconomic, and those kids struggle.
Mhm.
And when she went into this classroom mid-year, I want to say she was the third teacher in that classroom in a year
Mm.
because they couldn't handle it.
Mhm.
And the other teachers, they just could not handle the kids. And she went in there, this little 4'11" white girl in essentially Haitian ghetto, really. I mean, it's a tough area. And
Mhm.
she told those kids, listen, I don't care whether you're the smartest student in the class or whether you struggle. These are the rules, and all of you
Mhm.
are going to follow them. And these
Mhm.
are the consequences when you mess up. And she did the same thing. She listened to these kids, and there were always those couple kids that were like the teacher's pet, that no matter what they did, they never really got in trouble. And sure enough, by the end of the first week, all of a sudden the teacher's pets were meeting a brick wall, because it was like, oh, there's some standards in this class. And what happened was the other kids that felt like they were never given a fair shake suddenly saw that and went, hmm,
Mm.
maybe we can trust her.
Mhm.
And before you knew it, you had kids that were going up to her and saying, explaining, oh, there was a fight at lunch, there's a fight at recess, and they knew they would be heard.
Mhm.
They may in that discussion realize, okay, there's a better way for me to handle my anger, which
Yep.
is, isn't that the whole point? Like, you can't expect a 7 or 8 year old, and especially in a community like that, to just magically know how to handle things appropriately. They got to be taught.
Mhm.
And I watched those kids, just like in that description you gave, all of a sudden
Mhm.
they went, oh, I'm being heard.
Mhm.
I may have been in the wrong, and I may
Mhm.
have recess, detention tomorrow because of
Mhm.
it,
Mhm.
but I got listened to. And she built great
Yep.
relationships with those kids because exactly that. So I think that's
Yep.
fabulous, that of what
Yep.
you could be remembered for, it's that you're the one that listens. You're the one
Yep.
that gives
Yeah.
kids a fair shake.
Yep. Yeah, I have a funny story to tell. Just last week, I brought a couple boys in because I'd heard something had happened at recess, all those unstructured times, and
Yep.
I bring them in. And I said, "Remember, I always listen to both sides of the story. So when one person's talking, that we're not interrupting, even if you disagree with them. we're not interrupting. We're giving everybody the chance to tell their side of the story. And one little boy raises his hand. He goes, I'm just going to be honest. I was the one that did the loser sign.
He just fessed up. He's
Okay.
like, I'm good. We'll just wrap this up real quick.
I said, okay, great to know. Thanks for being honest with me here today.
Right. Well, and I
Yeah,
feel like we try to do the same thing with Nate, with our son, has always been, listen, you're gonna screw up. It's not the end of the world. If you lie to us about it, we will
that's
come
right.
down on you tenfold over if you just go, Dad, I was screwing around. I shouldn't have been throwing the ball in the house and I broke the coffee cup.
Hmm.
Sorry.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, cool. Well, let's get that cleaned up and then let's talk about appropriate behavior with the ball in the house. Have a
Right.
nice day. And
Yep.
he's grown up like, wait, you mean I'm not getting screamed at? I'm not getting yelled at. I'm not getting grounded for a month because I made a mistake? No, because I think you have to have room for kids to make mistakes, and that's how they grow from them. If it's just,
Absolutely.
if all hell just breaks loose because they happen to, you know, mouth off to a friend or a kid at the school, and then the other kid smacks them in the mouth for it, and it's like, well, we need to address that. But if they're just getting screamed at and suspended and get out, we're not listening to you, because that's what would happen at a school like that. Oh, you got in a
Hmm.
fight, you're suspended. Well, what
Yeah.
does that teach them?
Right. Right.
You know.
Absolutely.
Anyhow, well,
Yeah.
we're
It just,
we're coming up on close to 40 minutes here, and I know I'm really very grateful that you were able to give me this time this evening, because I know it's already been a long day at school, right? As I was telling you before we started recording, about 10 minutes before we came on, Sarah came back in because she's assistant principal at elementary school here. She came back in and she went, "We got to talk." And I was like, "Oh, I know that voice." So I want to wrap this up so we can get you back to your evening and you can kind of go unwind before another round starts tomorrow. Um, it's like it just never ends, just
yeah.
continuous.
But tomorrow's Friday, so that's good.
So let's do a quick lightning round of questions. Everybody comes on the show, answers 4 or 5 quick lightning round questions, and then we'll be done with this one. So 4 questions. Are you ready, Tricia?
I'll do my best.
Do your best. Favorite fair food?
You know, yeah, I'm
This is a
toying.
lightning round, Tricia.
I know, lightning round. Okay, we have homemade ice cream that is to die for,
Mhm.
but and so that is one of my favorites. But then also like a good old barbecue brisket or something like that.
You're
Yeah,
making me hungry. Last
yeah.
book you read?
When I have the opportunity to sit down and read a book, I love a book that doesn't take a lot of thought process. So I'm really into the Janet Ivanovich books.
Got it. This is your replacement question from the question that you didn't want earlier. Biggest pet peeve?
I think the biggest pet peeve goes back to everything that we have just talked about when everybody's voice doesn't get the opportunity to be heard.
Fair enough. You can have coffee with any historical figure. Who is it and what do you talk about?
I think I think it'd be someone like Ronald Reagan or George Bush. I think it'd be awesome to meet a president. And I remember having lots of respect for those two individuals when they were in office. And I just would like to find a little bit more about them personally as a person
Yeah.
and what led them to want to be in a role like that,
Yeah.
where you never really you can't please everybody. I have a sign here in my office that says you can't please everyone, you're not pizza. So they're
Well, when
dealing
I
with
used years ago when I used to be a magician, one of my jokes in the show, when like a joke would land with a thud, I would say, "Well, you can't please all the people on all the time." And apparently all of those people are in my show right now.
that's right.
This is what it is. I think it's interesting that you pick a president. I also would I would want to go back and talk to James Madison. He's my favorite
Okay.
president, but I would have some questions like, hey, I'd be like, yo, dog, this whole Bill of Rights and Constitution y'all wrote, I promise you 200 years from now, we're going to have no idea how to read the King's English. So could you translate some of this stuff for us? Simplify for us, please.
Absolutely.
Anyhow, well, Tricia, where can folks learn more about the Wright County Fair there in Eagle Grove?
we have a large presence on social media. So look for us on our Facebook page, Wright County Fair, Eagle Grove, Iowa, because there's multiple Wright County fairs.
That's
So
right.
Wright County Fair, Eagle Grove, Iowa is our Facebook handle. We're also on Instagram. We have a website. We're working to update all of those things as we speak. We're going to make the big announcement for this 2024's theme coming up really soon. So just watch those, follow those areas, and all of the announcements will be coming through there.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being with us. To all of our listeners, well, all 6 of you who are listening, thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.